God bless everyone. Today, I will share the testimony of our brother Irwin, a former rock musician whose life took a dramatic turn after a haunting vision. In a night that forever changed him, Irwin claims he encountered the restless spirits of rock legends Elvis Presley and Jimi Hendrix. This vision shook him to the core, bringing forth memories of fame, indulgence, and the emptiness that haunted his soul. Now, I'm going to read his letter just as it is, where we'll uncover the sins that bound him and the torment he faced. Through Irwin's story, we see a path back to Jesus, a journey from fame's dark allure to the peace he found in redemption. I grew up in a quiet town, in a small apartment that my mother and I shared after my father left. It was a modest life, but one day, a tenant moved in, who changed everything. He carried a black guitar case that seemed like it held a secret, something vibrant and rebellious. When he invited me to his room and played, the music that poured out was like nothing I'd ever heard. Loud, electric, alive. I learned it was called rock and roll, and he introduced me to the name Elvis Presley. Holding that guitar for the first time, I felt an energy awaken inside me, a spark that made everything else seem small. I was no longer just a kid in a quiet town. I was holding a ticket to a world of passion, fame, and freedom. From that moment, I knew I wanted to be on stage, to feel the thrill of the music, to live with that fire. As the years passed, I did everything I could to chase that dream. Soon, my name started circulating in the industry, and with it came the rewards of the rock star lifestyle: big paychecks, adoring fans, and a life filled with adventure. Every night became a blur of loud music, clinking glasses, and the thrill of applause. I had it all: fame, money, and more freedom than I ever imagined. I threw myself into the whirlwind of parties and relationships, waking up each day with new faces and empty bottles around me. The highs were exhilarating, and I lived for those moments when I could lose myself in the beat, the lights, and the roar of the crowd. But as intoxicating as it was, it started to chip away at something deep within me, a part of myself I didn't even realize I was losing. In the midst of the fame and indulgence, I slowly began to drift away from anything resembling faith or humility. My soul grew numb as the applause grew louder, and with every night that passed, I felt my heart harden. There was no room for spirituality in the world I had built around me. It was all about me, my desires, my pleasure. I'd forgotten the simplicity of life before the stage lights blinded me, the quiet peace of my old life with my mother, and the warmth of faith. But I didn't care. I was caught up in the endless pursuit of pleasure, ignoring the emptiness growing inside me. Little did I know that this path would soon lead me to a reckoning that would shake the very core of who I was, a moment so dark and unexpected that it would force me to confront everything I had become. New Year's Eve of 1987 was a night unlike any I'd ever lived before. My band and I had just come off a wild tour, and we wanted to end the year with a blowout that would leave all others in the dust. We filled the room with enough alcohol and drugs to drown out any trace of reality, anything that could remind us of life outside that night. The table was covered in empty bottles, cigarette ash, and scattered pills, a sight that, by then, felt as normal as breathing. We laughed, we shouted, we pushed each other to take just one more shot, just one more hit. It was reckless, it was exhilarating, and it left me feeling invincible, as though I was untouchable in the glow of that night's chaos. But as the hours wore on, the thrill started to fade, and the room, once alive with noise, seemed darker and colder, as if the night itself was waiting to swallow me whole. In the early morning, a creeping sense of dread settled over me. It wasn't like the hangovers or the moments of regret I'd felt before. This was something deeper, darker. I felt a chilling certainty, a voice whispering in the back of my mind, "This time, you won't come back." The words echoed, and no matter how much I tried to shake it off, I couldn't ignore the weight of it pressing down on me. My body was worn, my soul felt hollow, and for the first time in my life, I realized that I might not wake up from this. I looked around the room, saw the empty faces of my friends lost in their own worlds, and knew that I was on the edge of something I couldn't control. The sense of doom grew stronger, and I was powerless against it, a haunting reminder that I'd crossed too many lines, taken one risk too many. As I sank deeper into the darkness, I felt my consciousness slipping away. It was as if I was being pulled out of my body, drifting farther from reality with every second. My mind detached from my body, leaving me in a state of weightless emptiness, lost in a void where nothing felt real. My memories flashed before me in fragments, moments of laughter, faces of strangers, echoes of applause, but they felt distant, unreachable. I was trapped in this darkness, unable to find my way back, and the sense of control I'd once clung to was slipping through my fingers. Just when I thought I was lost for good, I felt something shifting, something pulling me toward a revelation I could never have imagined. And it was there, in that void, that I would encounter a presence that would change everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the price of the path I had chosen. As I drifted deeper into the darkness, my life began to unravel before my eyes like a film I couldn't pause or rewind. Memories of ambition and wild dreams filled the screen, scenes of me as a young man, hungry for fame, grasping for the life I had always dreamed of. I saw the faces of people I'd hurt, the broken relationships I'd left in my wake, all flashing by with a haunting clarity that I had long ignored. Moments of betrayal, reckless indulgence, and selfish decisions appeared one after another, each one like a ghost from my past demanding to be seen. The laughter I once shared with friends, the love I had promised but failed to keep, the family I had abandoned for a life of excess, all of it came rushing back, a painful reminder of how far I had drifted from the person I once hoped to be. I was forced to confront every mistake, every regret, and there was no escaping the guilt that began to settle like a weight on my chest. And then, in the silence of that darkness, I wasn't alone anymore. Out of the void, I saw a figure that both terrified and mesmerized me. Elvis Presley, standing there in the shadows, his face weary and filled with a sadness I'd never imagined. He wasn't the icon I had idolized. He was a man who looked lost, burdened by regrets that seemed to haunt him as they did me. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me with an expression that spoke of a shared understanding, as though he knew exactly the road I had traveled. Then, behind him, another presence emerged, Jimi Hendrix, with the same hollow gaze, detached and restless, as if he too was trapped by the weight of choices that had led him here. They were legends, but in this place, they seemed stripped of all that glory, reduced to souls bound by the consequences of their fame and ego, tormented by the emptiness that came with it. Elvis finally broke the silence, his voice low and filled with a sorrow that sent chills down my spine. He spoke of his life, of the arrogance and pride that fame had nurtured within him. He confessed how he had come to see himself as a god, as if he was above everything and everyone. The applause, the adoration. He admitted how it had blinded him, making him believe he could live without humility, without God. Elvis's words were like knives cutting through my own defenses, and as he spoke, I could feel his pain as if it were my own. He talked about the false divinity that fame had granted him, a pedestal so high that it had separated him from everything real, everything meaningful. The more he tried to hold on to that power, the further he drifted from his true self, from any semblance of peace. His voice wavered as he recounted the emptiness that followed him, a darkness that swallowed him whole. As I listened to Elvis and felt the silent gaze of Jimi, something within me began to crack open. I realized, with a sense of horror, that their stories were my own. I too had let fame consume me, had traded love and sincerity for the fleeting thrill of applause and admiration. I could see the faces of people I'd hurt, the love I'd taken for granted, the life I'd sacrificed on the altar of my own ego. It was all so clear now, how the life I had once dreamed of had turned into a prison, chaining me to desires that could never satisfy. In that moment, I understood that this was my own reckoning, a moment of truth that would force me to confront the depth of my sins. But even as the weight of these realizations bore down on me, I sensed that something more awaited, something that would challenge everything I thought I knew about myself, my choices, and the path that lay ahead. The darkness around me was like nothing I had ever known, cold, vast, and completely devoid of any light or warmth. It felt as if the darkness stretched endlessly, swallowing everything, leaving no trace of time or direction. There was an eerie emptiness here, an absence that was more than physical. It was spiritual. The void seemed to echo my own hollow soul, reflecting every corner of regret and sorrow I had buried over the years. It was as though the darkness had a consciousness of its own, feeding off the regrets of those who wandered here, amplifying the weight of their sins until it became unbearable. I could feel it pressing down on me as if my soul were exposed, vulnerable to the relentless cold of this empty space. Every sound, every movement felt dampened, smothered by an oppressive silence that was more menacing than any noise could be. I looked around, barely able to make out vague shapes and shadowy figures drifting in the distance, faces frozen in expressions of despair and loneliness. The weight of the silence was suffocating, amplifying the isolation until it felt like a physical force. I shivered, not from cold, but from the profound sense of abandonment that clung to this place. The darkness felt alive, as though it watched and judged, taking a perverse satisfaction in our suffering. Each breath I took was shallow and strained, as if the darkness were reaching inside me, forcing me to confront the parts of myself I'd tried so desperately to ignore. This place was more than a setting. It was a reflection of my own soul and the souls of those around me, lost, adrift, clinging to past choices that had led us here. The air was thick with an unspoken sorrow, a relentless yearning for redemption that felt just out of reach. I sensed that I was not alone in my torment, that others here were weighed down by their own sins, haunted by memories they couldn't escape. It was a realm where regret lingered like a poison, where every soul was bound by chains of their own making, each one longing for a forgiveness that seemed impossible to attain. And as I stood there, feeling the despair closing in on me, I began to wonder, was there a way out of this darkness? Or was I destined to remain here, shackled by my choices for eternity? When I opened my eyes, the darkness was gone, replaced by the blurry, familiar light of a hospital room. My vision slowly sharpened, and I saw my family surrounding me, their faces a mix of worry and relief. My mother's eyes were filled with tears, my siblings hovering nearby, all of them watching me as though I had returned from the dead. I could barely comprehend what had happened, my mind still haunted by the shadows of that other place, the faces of Elvis and Jimi, the suffocating void I had just escaped. The doctor explained that I had been in a coma for days, teetering on the edge of life and death after an overdose. I lay there, stunned, realizing just how close I had come to joining the souls lost in that darkness, trapped by the very sins I had let consume me for so long. In those first moments of clarity, a profound sense of gratitude washed over me, stronger than anything I had ever felt before. I looked at the faces of my family, the people who had been there all along, the ones I had overlooked, neglected, and taken for granted. How many times had I ignored their calls, brushed off their concerns, all in the name of fame and self-indulgence? The regret was overwhelming, but with it came a powerful urge to make things right. I reached for my mother's hand, her fingers trembling as she held mine, and I whispered an apology, asking her to forgive me. I turned to each of them, my voice breaking as I sought their forgiveness, realizing that these were the people who truly cared who had been waiting for me to return. In that moment, I understood what I had nearly lost and vowed never to take them, or life itself, for granted again. From that day forward, I committed myself to a new path, one grounded in humility and faith. I dedicated my life to God, seeking His forgiveness and striving each day to undo the damage of the years I had wasted. Every morning, I prayed for strength to stay away from the temptations that once ruled my life, to rebuild my soul piece by piece. I poured my energy into finding purpose beyond the empty applause, filling the void with acts of service, gratitude, and devotion. And now, as I share my story, I hope that it serves as a testament, a warning, and a light to anyone who finds themselves lost, as I once was. I want others to understand that there is redemption, that faith can pull you back from the edge. In Jesus, I found peace, a peace deeper than any applause, more lasting than any fame. But my journey isn't over. Every day is a step forward, and there is one final lesson, one revelation that I must share with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Please share them in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going and support each other on our own journeys toward peace and purpose. Your story or insight could make a difference for someone watching,